everyone. For our case study this week, I chose case 5.1 titled, Should Doctors Talk to Relatives Without a Competent Patient's Consent? The author of this study is Oliver Mitten, who wrote on how attending a clinical school, one of the first principles covered was patient confidentiality. It had appeared as simple in that confidentiality was important to the doctor-patient relationship and that a professional should not tell others not involved in the patient's care information discussed in the consultation. However, he quickly realized that this issue was more complex. The General Medical Council guidelines do not specifically mention the sharing of information with a competent patient's relatives, but it does address that patient consent should be acquired before disclosing information outside of the healthcare team. However, in Mitten's clinical attachments, he and his fellow students consistently saw doctors speak to relatives without asking for any permission from patients. Mitten further discussed the issue with clinicians who responded that it was important to involve relatives and share information with them, while they also agreed that consent should be first sought. From here, Mitten's viewpoint was split as to whether it was acceptable to speak to relatives with or without a competent patient's consent. Some of the moral issues involved in this case are whether a doctor has a duty of confidentiality to his or her patient and whether this duty is qualified or unqualified. A qualified duty means that the doctor has a duty of confidentiality, but exceptions may be valid. These exceptions, though, are revealed to the patient at the very beginning of the professional relationship. An unqualified duty means that there are no exceptions, and a doctor must maintain complete patient confidentiality. On the other hand, a consequentialist may argue that if the perceived harm outweighs the benefits of maintaining confidentiality, then the doctor's duty is to avert that harm. In this case, with a qualified duty, exceptions may involve sharing information only with close relatives such as parents or children. As stated, an unqualified duty means the doctor can say nothing. And from a consequentialist view, if there is more harm that could be done to the individual or even to the relatives, say from a disease or something that may be genetic and need to be further explored, then the doctor should be able to discuss matters with these relatives without a competent patient's consent. This also may be relative to the utilitarian view. In making moral decisions within ethical dilemmas, the utilitarian believes that one should compare the situation in terms of quantity and quality as to the richness of the enjoyments of the available opportunities that fall as far as possible from pain. It stresses the importance of positive benefits to the most people, or also stated as the greatest good for the greatest number of people. If there is harm that could be done to others in maintaining patient confidentiality, but it only benefits the patient, then it is likely that the utilitarian will agree that a doctor may speak to relatives about medical matters without a patient's consent. On the other hand, the deontological view holds that no matter what, a doctor should maintain patient confidentiality and stresses privacy, autonomy, promise-keeping, and loyalty. Other moral issues that may be involved in the case include considering the primary concern of a physician compared to the duty of protection to protect patient autonomy. As Mitten also mentions, autonomy can be enhanced when one holds a view of autonomy that stresses the importance of evaluation and rational choices. In our textbook, Mary Beth Armstrong says this:
Since the layman is unfamiliar with the road to recovery, he cannot sift through the circumstances of his life and habits to determine what is information pertinent to his health. As a consequence, he must disclose all information in his consultations with his doctor, even that which is embarrassing, disgraceful, or incriminating. To promote full disclosure, the medical profession extends the promise of secrecy.
The information that doctors convey to us can also be very advanced, and as we do not always fully understand these details, it can be very beneficial for relatives to also have knowledge on matters to further help us to evaluate the situation and any further decisions that may need to be made. I also know that when we receive medical news, our emotions can sometimes fog our understanding and reactions. This would also emphasize the importance that someone else have knowledge of one's conditions. just as we discussed with the case on the young girl who wanted an abortion and her right to confidentiality. While it is important that she, as an adolescent, have a parent, guardian, or counselor to guide her through her decisions, she is not alone. Many adults also need further counsel or advising before they are able to make effective decisions, especially in devastating circumstances. Additionally, if the doctor finds that the patient cannot completely care for himself, then wouldn't it be his duty to inform a relative on the patient's condition who could potentially be a caregiver or the patient's contact in the case of an emergency? At the beginning of this course, we also had a reading from Stovall, who characterized a profession's end as the function it performs in society, or by its unique role in helping to constitute a society. The primary concern of the doctor should be the function of his occupation, which is to enhance the health and care of the people in the society. So, as the doctor has taken on this responsibility to lead the patient towards health and the society as a whole towards improved health, the doctor should, again, be able to speak about medical matters without patient consent. Wouldn't this also imply that the duty of caring for the patient is equal to or stronger than the duty of confidentiality owed to the patient, as it is the primary goal of the medical profession to advance health? Two of Mitten's concerns on whether doctors should talk to relatives without a competent patient's consent were patient autonomy and that information would be shared with someone whom the patient wishes it were not. While he thought autonomy may be weakened if a patient were left out of a conversation, further reflection allowed him to see how autonomy could be enhanced in evaluation and rational choices. And when it came to the concern of sharing information with relatives that the patient wants to remain confidential, he also found the benefits to be greater than the rare occasion that complaints arise. Throughout his first year, Mitten practiced both approaches, the one taught in the classroom and the one learned at his clinical attachments with other doctors, and in the end, he favored the latter. From this, he concluded that classroom ethical teaching is limited and lacks the needed experience in specific situations. I would also agree with Mitten's view on the matter. One thing that he had recognized was that clinicians did tend to be careful about exactly what they were saying and to whom, which I find very important as well. One can generally tell whether someone is seeking information to do harm to an individual, but this is a very rare case, and generally, a relative only wants to fully weigh the options available for the patient and help to achieve the utmost care for their loved one. I also think that there could be some ways to help eliminate some of the fears of dissent involved in releasing this information, such as having patients state if there are any specific individuals to whom they do not want any information to be released. While this option may be available, it may be necessary, though, that there be an exclusion if there is any potential harm to that third party. Another idea may be to limit the number of relatives to whom a doctor can relay the information. In conclusion, there may be personal concerns to confidentiality of medical information, but a doctor should be able to discuss these matters with relatives in an effort to provide the best care for the patient and prevent any additional harm to others in society. If you all have any more thoughts on the case or possible alternatives for doctors, feel free to comment. Thank you all for watching.